This is The Moneymakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Welcome to the show this evening on the eve of the medium-term budget policy statement. At this stage, we're still pretty convinced that Pravin Gordhan will be presenting the medium-term budget policy statement, but always wonder whether or not in any great drama if there's a second reading the script just in case. Chief executives, former chief executives, have been taking strong stance for the first time in a very long time and in support of the finance minister, amongst a list of former chief executives adding their name to support of the finance minister, Jacko Maree, the former chief executive of the Standard Bank Group. Do you still have the job of senior banker? Do you still go around and have big lunches and look for deals?
I still do that, and it's great fun. It's what I used to do as a youngster, and I really enjoy helping the bank make money. Yeah.
No, but that's interesting because you're still then involved in day-to-day activities at the bank. So to put your name to a strongly worded statement of support to Pravin Gordhan is it's not a small deal.
No, I think, Bruce, what has unfolded in our country over the last year or so, particularly since December last year, has been very unsettling. And there does come a time, I guess, where a businessman do have to speak out. I think, in normal times, it's not really appropriate. I think business has got to concentrate on things that will affect their ability to operate well and profitably in the interests of the country. But at the moment, we've got a whole bunch of other issues that are of critical national importance. And in some ways, you wonder whether we're fiddling as Rome burns.
I mean, what's the inflection point for you in terms of deciding this far and no further? I actually need to make a political statement, which is not, I don't think, in your nature.
Well, I think we've all been wrestling with this problem. You saw over the weekend that the whole of business leadership, really the biggest companies in South Africa, the chief executives pretty much of all of those companies put their name to similar sentiments. What do we stand for? What is important? What are the core institutions in our country? And what are we against? The corruption and the erosion of sound values and so on. Now, in normal times, I think the politicians, typically the leaders of the country politically, would be leading and driving those sort of arguments and discussions. But there seems to be a vacuum at the moment, and I think a lot of us just, particularly with the potential threat of a downgrade, felt you had to do more.
Well, I mean, with the threat of a downgrade, it's ever present. It's what is sort of lurking in the shadows. I'm very firmly of the belief that had Nhlanhla not got fired, we probably would have had the downgrade in June because we were in a steady spiral. The sacking of Nhlanhla galvanized South Africa in a way that probably hasn't been galvanized in this modern democracy. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. You had everybody kind of dropping everything and saying we have to try to ensure that this downgrade doesn't happen. Because, of course, once a downgrade happens, the pressure's off. The crisis is there and the pressure's off. So I think at the moment it's acting as a galvanizing force. So I really am a strong believer that we have to try everything that we possibly can to avoid the downgrade, because when you look at what's happened to countries that have gone to junk, the consequences typically are much worse than people expect. People say it's already priced in and so on. It's not. It'll be much worse, and it takes a long time to ever recover from junk status. And at the moment, it's a lever, it's a pressure point, and we're all galvanized to try and avoid that.
No, but what are the odds? I mean, let's assume medium-term budget policy statement tomorrow goes well. The finance minister sets out, as he always does, very pragmatic and sensible steps in order to raise some revenue, to spend a little less where it's less important, and to focus attention on the areas where it's so desperately needed. He will deliver a comfortable medium-term budget policy statement, no doubt, and it's a pivotal one. Let's assume he does that. Let's assume he goes to court or doesn't get to court on the 2nd of November and that blows off and goes away. Odds on us keeping our rating?
I think we've still got a pretty good chance if we do the right things. It's not just the finance minister. No. Clearly, I think what the rating agencies are looking for in my discussions with them, they are looking for some degree of cohesion within government. Yeah. It's not just about one man or just the central bank and the finance ministry. But I think we have a lot going for us as a country. When I go to other emerging markets and look at what's happened in Brazil and so forth, I think we still have many great positives. One of them is a very strong and robust business community, big corporations that are profitable and continue despite difficult times to perform quite well.
But there's the very real risk that the fabric of the business environment is being eroded to a point where if business doesn't stand up and make its voice heard, 5 years from now we'll look back and say, well, we missed an opportunity to rescue an economy from junk.
That's quite correct. I mean, business can only flourish within a soundly functioning political system, or reasonably soundly functioning political system. So clearly, you can look at countries like Italy,
yes,
where for years the country went on despite what was going on
What a
politically.
glorious dysfunctional state. If we could be dysfunctional like the Italians, I don't mind being dysfunctional, but it doesn't always work out.
But eventually the chickens come home to roost. So you can only go on for so long, tinkering with some of the most important institutions in the country before you see, really unpleasant consequences. And I think that's what we all fear, and therefore we and business leadership and these sorts of organizations are now spending time worrying about, supporting our core institutions. These are things we never worried about in the past, that we took it as for granted.
I mean, Tony Treyer so famously was torn apart by Thabo Mbeki more than 10 years ago. I mean, probably 12 years ago now, for daring to suggest there was political risk in South Africa. He was right. Just it's transpired in a different way.
Yes, I think so. I think the discussions about political risk, what politicians were happy to hear from businessmen and so on, I think we were all in those days trying very hard to work together to, really act as Team South Africa. And then you would, of course, get discord when somebody made a strong statement. But I think the ball game has changed. We clearly now have great divisions within the ruling party, within government, and so it behoves all of us to come out and say where we stand, or where businesses stand.
I mean, we can't have functional businesses in a dysfunctional society, and we are on the edge of dysfunction. How do we pull it back? So businesses stood up, business leaders, former business leaders, current business leaders have stood up and said, this far and no further, bring it back from the brink. But business and politics are a bit like oil and water. There's a very real risk, of course, that politics pushes back and says, who are you to tell us what to do?
Exactly. I mean, there's a saying which is not mine, which is you can't be pro-growth and anti-business. Business drives growth, and if people understand, and if politicians understand that the only way to improve the living standards of everyone is to have growth, of course, inclusive growth, then you need strong business, and for business to be strong, you need a sound political system. Now, clearly, there is a risk when you have business people expressing views in call it the political arena, that you're going to have a backlash. But I suppose that's where we find ourselves, and
it's a risk worth taking.
And well, I just think it is where we are as a country at the moment, and thank goodness we have a vibrant press. That we are, I think the fault lines are there for all to see at the moment, which perhaps they weren't a few years ago.
And that's the visibility of the problem is there, and it's fine. We can now deal with the problem. Beforehand, it was so there was so much cloak and dagger at play. In your daily life, though, as the senior banker at Standard Bank, and the talking to business leaders, looking for investment, looking for Standard Bank to fund deals, how different is it today than when you were starting out as chief executive in the gung-ho days of the early 2000s?
I think, we have a much more, almost cynical, realistic view of the world. I think we've matured. Those were the heady days when I think, the Rainbow Nation and everything was going in the right direction for South Africa. I think we have a much more realistic situation at the moment where going's pretty tough, as it is in most places in the world. And we have got to, as companies and as a country, position ourselves in a competitive world. I mean, people aren't looking to help us, we've got to help ourselves, not shoot ourselves in the foot.
At Davos this year, became very apparent when the South Africa delegation got no visitors. Nobody was coming to the Kirchner Museum in Davos, but people were going to see the Iranians, they were going to go and see the Argentines, and you've had experience there. The opportunities were seen to be elsewhere. We've got to create the space where opportunity can thrive once again. At
the end of the day, money, and we need foreign money because we don't have a huge amount of savings in our country. Foreign money goes to where the opportunities are. They may go to quite dangerous countries. They may go to countries where the rule of law is not great, but where the opportunity is sufficient. And so, we are finding ourselves at the moment in a situation where perhaps the opportunities elsewhere look more appealing than this enormous complexity and confrontation that we have, or contestation that we have in this country.
Are you finding that though in your daily life as trying to get the deals done?
No, I think one's got to be, we tend to perhaps all become a little bit too introspective and a bit too pessimistic.
Look, I agree with you, yes.
If you look at the results of the big companies, they continue to do well. Sales are still there. People are finding ways of expanding their businesses, growing elsewhere on the continent, etc. So I think South African business people generally are very resourceful, and there's so many South African business people that have done well in many different jurisdictions, not just here at home. So I think that is a national asset, and it's something that we have to be proud of.
Jack and Marie, thank you so much for taking time out and coming to join us on the Moneymakers this evening, a special edition on the eve of the medium-term budget policy statement. Have you seen the medium-term budget? No, you haven't. No, he hasn't. You see, big business has not captured the national treasury. Point made. That is it for the Moneymakers this evening. Thanks to Jack and Marie for coming in and sharing some very heartfelt concerns about the short-term future of South Africa as the economy comes under pressure, of course, and politics comes under huge pressure. Big business standing up and making its voice heard. Thanks for watching. Good night.